HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Progressive Reports, a manual for the destruction of American values and Christian morality. A satire by Frank J. Connor. Read by Mike Chamberlain. Disclaimer: this book is a work of fictionalized satire. All incidents, dialogue, and characters, aside from the named public personalities and real circumstances, are products of the author's imagination. Preface. History will record that we are in the midst of the most crucial battle our nation has faced since the Civil War. While no armies stand poised to attack our cities or kill our people, there is a force at work in our country that threatens to destroy, from within, everything we know ourselves to be. The war in which we are now engaged is for the soul of our nation, our people, and our values. The social change that has been progressing for the past several decades is finally coming to a head. The morality on which Western civilization was built is now on the verge of defeat. The church is rocked by scandal, leaving Catholics without a moral leader. The ancient civilizations of Europe have surrendered themselves to foreigners who seek their ruin. That once proud continent has all but lost its identity. Our nation's founding principles are of little consequence to the majority of Americans who are willing to sacrifice everything for comfort. We are in a vulnerable position, but we have it in our power to reverse our trajectory. We have it in our power to change the course of history by making the choice, always, to do what is right, even when it is difficult. Instead of being the generation that let the United States finally surrender the last vestiges of its values, letting it join the rest of the world in moral squalor, we can be the generation that puts our country back on the course that first led it to greatness. If we are to do this, we will need to understand the threats we face so that we might effectively combat them. The correspondence enclosed in this book outlines some of those threats. They are a collection of several dispatches sent by progressive student David Gore to the Democratic National Committee. They outline his plan for the creation of a progressive future for America. It is unimportant how these documents came into my possession. Suffice to say, a friend of a friend entrusted me to bring them to the attention of the public. Because I was not their primary recipient, I am not able to date them precisely or place them in exact chronological order. I, therefore, ordered them myself, taking care to group together reports that were logically connected. In some places, I was, however, able to make educated guesses as to the order of these reports, but it is possible I am not privy to the entirety of Mr. Gore's mail. It is also important to note that these are not necessarily the writings of an ideological zealot. They are the work of a man who seeks power for the progressive movement above all other considerations, and are addressed to an organization more concerned with winning elections and gaining power than they are with any discernible principle. Many kind-hearted liberals who are genuinely trying to do good by those around them, should justly find these reports offensive. They are as much victims of Gore and the Democratic National Committee as the conservatives the documents intend to undermine. My publishing what I have decided to call the progressive reports is not, then, intended to pit Republicans against Democrats or conservatives against liberals. It is meant to shed light on the fight between what is right and what is wrong. Frank J. Connor, Villanova University, September 17, 2018. Introduction. For the attention of the Democratic National Committee. If the events transpiring at St. Augustine University of Philadelphia are any indication of things to come, the Democratic Party has cause for great concern. It seems the hold progressivism has had on the college population might be slipping at our school. I need not remind you how catastrophic it would be if conservative influence supplanted ours at the university level, but it appears to be the case. This university's chapter of college Republicans, under the leadership of a man we shall call FJC, has announced its intention to fight back against all that progressivism holds dear. In his club's introductory statement, FJC pledged his organization to be a platform for conservative students to express their vile ideology. He pledges to create an environment where the non-licensed, non-conformist can feel free to openly express his opinion without fear of social or, in some cases, institutional retribution. My fellow progressives at this university and I recognize how dangerous this can be. If it sets a precedent, this trend could sweep across the country and destroy, from within, the progressive society we seek to create before it has the chance to take hold. We cannot allow this to happen. It is for this reason that I have decided to pen a series of reports to you, the DNC, outlining the ways we, as a unified front, can ensure that conservatism is never allowed a chance to overwhelm the good intentions of progressive society. Over the weeks and months to follow, I intend to send the committee a series of dispatches detailing my observations of conservative activities, as exemplified by FJC, and my recommendations for future actions based on my experience facing conservatism daily at this university. It is my most sincere hope that these reports will help the DNC bring about the destruction of conservatism and the antiquated values for which conservatives stand. If they had their way, the United States would be engaged in creating what Thomas Jefferson once called the Empire of Liberty. Knowing the social, economic, and racial consequences this would have for the rest of the world, it must never be allowed to come to pass. To avoid this fate, let my words be an insight into the conservative mind. Let them inspire the Democratic Party to use its political might to change this country for the better. Let them serve the movement I love above all other things, guiding the United States to the progressive future it deserves. David Gore, St. Augustine University of Philadelphia, February 27, 2018. Report number 1. Identity Politics. In recent years, identity politics has become the cornerstone of our movement. Its importance in furthering progressive ideals cannot be underestimated. It is crucial in providing us the means of establishing a progressive future for this country. Identity politics allows progressivism to divide people into manageable identity groups, respectively addressing the key issues of our time: trans bathrooms, the wage gap, bigotry, and gender roles. The much-discussed economic and geopolitical issues are just distractions used by our conservative enemies to divert people from what is truly important. Conservatives like FJC oppose our use of identity politics, chiefly because they are bigots, but also because they see it as a way to divide and distract the American people. This is complete nonsense, of course. Identity politics is a way to bring people together in the tribes with which they identify. FJC would say such things only serve to destroy the national fabric of the United States, pitting these groups against one another and making us less of a nation. He fails to see the bigger picture. The emphasis he and conservatives put on treating everyone as an individual threatens social justice. It diverts our eyes away from the small groups we use to classify people. If we were to see everyone as an individual, how would we ever be able to determine which groups are oppressing each other? We would have to hold individuals responsible for their own actions, instead of holding groups responsible for individuals' actions. For the purposes of identity politics, personal identities can be divided into 3 main categories, though, of course, there are more: race, gender, and sexual orientation. It is important that progressive and all socially conscious people understand these aspects if they wish to utilize this strategy effectively. If used to its full potential, identity politics can help overcome the conservative ideology and the revolting American society for which conservatives stand. Race. The advancement of progressivism requires that we always seek to boil down every aspect of a person or situation to identity. Race is usually easy to take advantage of, as it carries with it the most historical baggage and social anxiety. For this reason, every issue in society, every instance of conflict or confrontation, must be viewed as an issue of race. In every situation, the question should always be asked, what was the race of the oppressor, and what was the race of the victim? Every situation has an oppressed party, but straight white men are invulnerable to oppression. The glorious Black Lives Matter movement has been extremely successful in this initiative. They constantly scour police dispatches across the country for instances of white police officers brutalizing defenseless young black men. They then masterfully cut through the irrelevant facts of each case to point out the truest cause of those acts of violence, the racial causes. By turning what would otherwise be just another overlooked instance of cold-blooded murder on the part of police into a national issue, Black Lives Matter generates a racial divide that further ingrains racial identity into people's minds. Not only are they able to impress this difference in race into the minds of the affected minority group, but they generate this feeling within the oppressing group as well. When Black Lives Matter chooses to oppose acts of racism through peaceful protests, as have been seen in Ferguson, Missouri, and Baltimore, where only $25 million in damages was done, they then expose racist white people in their midst. Anyone who questions the motives of Black Lives Matter or suggests that their protests should be suppressed because of a few completely justifiable acts of violence is clearly racist. We should all follow the example set by Black Lives Matter. We should all look first at the racial parameters of the matter at hand without getting bogged down in the legal details or individual circumstances. Hyper-awareness of race, then, is of paramount necessity. Once people become so aware of race that they are blind to the less important facts of a situation, it will be easy for us to make absolutely every act a racially motivated one. Race will be the cause of everything, and so any misfortune experienced will be seen to be not the fault of an individual, but an uncontrollable consequence of his race. The implications of this are profound. Traditionally oppressed minority groups will be completely free of blame for everything that happens to them. When a black man goes to jail for murder, he will be seen for who he truly is, a victim of the racist white system of justice. The dreamers, who came to this country by heroically running across an unwalled section of the border, are not breaking the law, as conservatives heartlessly attest. They are simply defying a system that seeks to subjugate them and millions of other minorities. Whatever a member of a minority group does, then, is the direct result of their white oppressors and the inherent racism of those white oppressors. The advantage to progressives of this racialization is that we are allowed to focus all of our attention on racial issues. We can completely avoid addressing the less relevant concerns of the majority of the American people. Hillary Clinton demonstrated this principle masterfully. It would have won her the election if not for Trump's treasonous Russian collusion. Clinton was able to cater to the social justice movement in her continuous battle against the character of Trump and his supporters. She justly labeled the majority of Americans a basket of deplorables when they opposed opening our borders to all who care to enter, when they dared to suggest that allowing millions of refugees from the Middle East into the United States might not be the wisest decision, and when they asked unreasonable questions regarding the reasons for poverty and crime among minority communities. Hillary was so successful because she swept aside the concerns of those deplorables ignoring their existence altogether, and instead addressed racial concerns. Think of how poorly she would have done had she decided to travel to those dreary states in Middle America to talk about the ways she was going to bring back their lost manufacturing jobs. Nobody really cares about manufacturing jobs. Nobody really cares about those people in the boonies between New York and California. Hillary was completely right to condemn them and their support for Donald Trump as the sheer act of bigotry it truly was. By writing these terrible people off, Clinton would appeal directly to the people oppressed by those out-of-work, blue-collar workers and the social justice warriors in Brooklyn and San Francisco who really care. This method allowed Hillary to avoid the pitfalls of taking a concrete position on policy initiatives to which conservatives tend to cling. Instead of asserting a position on U.S. relations with Russia or presenting a platform on how she intended to deal with ISIS, assertions that conservatives would undoubtedly use against her if she failed to fulfill her promise, she doubled down on her emotional appeals. Consequently, she reinforced the beliefs of those who agree with her, while signaling to everyone who cares more about those geopolitical issues than race that their votes are not wanted in our movement. Hillary was able to gather millions of socially just supporters in this way, while exerting minimal effort. By appealing to people's emotions and a genuine desire to make the world a better place for marginalized communities, Clinton was able to garner an almost religious level of support. For people dedicated to gaining racial justice, voting for Hillary was a moral obligation. By using these techniques of social justice, the progressive movement can become the movement of racial justice. This exciting prospect would mean that, for the first time in history, America could see a truly dynamic political movement with the ability to dedicate itself entirely to racial issues and instances of racial unrest as they occur. This form of racial progressivism has the potential to exist outside the confines of the established political ideologies, and can, therefore, apply emotional truths to every situation rather than rigid sets of principles. The possibility for a movement stemming entirely from empathy is one that should inspire all caring people. Whenever injustice is inflicted upon a member of a minority community, the full force of progressivism should be turned to addressing that injustice and to making others face the injustice head-on. It is paramount in such cases that all of society stop to recognize the wrongdoings committed by some of its component members. Constantly working to resolve every individual issue in a mindful and progressive way will help us bring people into our movement by preserving a constant flame in the hearts of the caring. This flame will not fail to inspire the empathetic to adopt our movement as their own. What person with a heart and a desire not to be socially isolated would refuse to join a movement whose goal is to respond to acts of injustice committed against minorities? A person would have to be cruel and cold-blooded not to join our fight. The college campus is the perfect environment in which to put this initiative into action. College students are always looking for an opportunity to be involved in something larger than themselves. This, coupled with a naturally active social conscience, makes them prime candidates to join a progressive movement that labels itself racially just. Here at St. Augustine, we witnessed the University Society for Racial Inclusion stage a march across campus in response to FJC's article placing more value on an individual's character than on his race. If words alone will draw enough energy in the college community to inspire a march, one can only imagine the level of dedication that could be mustered if these students were presented the opportunity to march against racist acts. It is also important to note that the dedication here marshaled can be diverted to other causes within the progressive movement that are not racial in nature. Once we finally establish that our movement is the only one that promises racial equality, then every other group must, in the eyes of the public, necessarily be opposed to racial justice. Therefore, the conservative movement's opposition to progressivism, regardless of which aspect of progressivism they oppose, can be seen as racist. This incontrovertible fact gives us leverage that the conservative movement can never have. The advantage to us is that we never need to address the question they raise. We can simply reinforce the notion that they raise the questions they do, and so render their responses, as a result of some deep-seated racial motive. To elaborate on this point, it is useful to consider the recent example of Trump's travel ban, which was largely supported by Trumpists and conservatives alike. Most on the right would formulate an argument based on national security concerns and statistics. They usually argue that without a proper system of vetting in place, opening our borders to areas of the world that are known hotspots for terrorist activity, breeding grounds for terrorists, is unwise. They would say that Trump's freeze on accepting refugees from countries that are known exporters of terrorism is not only reasonable, but the only sane option. We know better. We know, first of all, that their motives are not born of concern for the American people and their safety, but born entirely of their bigoted hatred of the historically peaceful Islamic faith. Realizing that this is their only motive, we need not address safety concerns at all to win the argument. We need only throw accusations of racism at them. We are saved the inconvenience of wasting our time formulating concrete arguments addressing the concerns of our opponents. Again, the opportunity to increase the popularity of our movement is present in this method. In creating a single position for the opponents of conservatism to rally behind, individuals do not need to be well versed in any topic or argument to launch their own assaults on our political opponents. All they have to be able to do is reaffirm the line, "Those who disagree with the movement of racial justice are racists." Instead of a huge knowledge base being required, instead of needing to waste time thinking, a person on our side only has to be able to say the word bigot, and our opponents are defeated. While the conservative movement stands as a bastion of elitism, with followers who are required to be acquainted with such documents as the Constitution, progressivism is infinitely more inclusive. Instead of a person being forced to develop a set of beliefs on their own by absorbing information from the world around them, progressives are simply told what they should believe, making it easy to further the objectives of their movement. The ultimate goal of progressivism's racial strategy has always been to create an environment where a person's race is the only factor in determining their political affiliation. By labeling our movement as the only one that defends minorities, we will be situated as the natural political choice for members of those minority groups. How could minorities fail to vote for the political movement that has their best interests at heart? We are the only movement that recognizes that their misfortunes are entirely the fault of white society. While those on the right think that minorities can be helped by a better economy and by providing them jobs and a means of escaping their situation on their own, we recognize that these poor people are incapable of escaping poverty on their own. We, therefore, believe that it is the responsibility of the government to provide them the means to live. Through progressive support for government welfare programs, we keep alive the impoverished minorities across our nation. By the grace of progressivism, minorities are able to survive. For our tireless efforts, we are rewarded by minority groups with their political support. By convincing them that their salvation is in our hands alone, we have been able to make their politics a function of their race. We have proven ourselves so successful in helping the African American community that 88% of black voters cast their ballots for Hillary Clinton in 2016. To a large extent, we have ingrained progressive politics into African American culture, but we must go further. We must seek a future where minorities cannot find a place for themselves anywhere but the progressive movement. This can be accomplished, partly, by continuing to convince them that Republicans and conservatives are actively oppressing them. Our popular culture does a great job of this. Popular music, such as rap, is riddled with accusations of brutality on the part of the police. The creators of this music are the few members of racially oppressed minorities who have taken advantage of the aspects of American life that allow talented individuals to become successful. They now use the fruits that the system has given them to subvert it and to expose it for the cruel regime it is. By pointing out instances of police brutality, such as those identified by groups like Black Lives Matter, these musicians are reinforcing the belief that America is not safe for African Americans. It helps minorities realize what we progressives have been saying for over 50 years, that American society must be completely destroyed. Through his culture, we have convinced the black man that America is bad and requires progressivism to change the country in his favor. If we take action now to spread this knowledge to members of other minority groups, we can show them that they, too, require progressivism to solve their woes. We will be able to create a future where political identity is inherited in the same manner as skin color. Gender. While nothing is able to stir emotions quite like racial tension, its scope is too limited for it to be the sole vehicle for identity politics. It is, therefore, essential that identity politics not be limited to just racial concerns. To cover the ground that racial tension cannot, the leaders of progressivism have realized that they can tap into a minority group that makes up over half of the United States population: women. I realize that it may sound incorrect to characterize women as a minority, but it is necessary that I do so in order to accurately display their lack of representation. Identity would not be complete as a tool for the progressive movement without the addition of gender. Women and other non-male genders have taken the brunt of oppression by the majority since day one. We cannot pretend to stand for social justice if our movement does not also include them. Thanks to their vast numbers, these oppressed women have the potential to stand as the primary soldiers of progressivism. Many of them are from non-oppressed, wealthy white backgrounds and have grown up surrounded by the privilege against which they now fight. They bring to the table resources that most racial minorities cannot. While groups like Black Lives Matter fight against the racial oppression and the systemic racism confronting them, subjugated gender groups fight against the traditional Western gender roles and social norms imposed by white men. These norms act as socially constructed prisons, created by men to maintain their positions of authority. Women and members of other genders must hear and understand this point, so that they understand what is truly happening to them, and so that they may be appropriately enraged by their social constraints. While far from being the most marginalized group in American society, women often face the brunt of male oppression. It is therefore important that we understand the struggles of American women and discover methods of alleviating their suffering, while simultaneously breaking apart the foundational elements of our nation. Women in this country face discrimination of all kinds, but it is wage discrimination that affects them in a way most useful to progressivism. Wage discrimination is the name given to describe the average difference in the average man's salary from the average woman's. The United States Census Bureau has indicated that, in 2016, women earned only 82% of what men earned. Like with clear instances of racism, further analysis of this shocking statistic is unnecessary and unwanted, as it can only stand in the way of the more important narrative. Women are being discriminated against. Men are actively setting aside what is in their own everyday best interest by making the choice to pay women less than they deserve. If, in this instance, we accept the conservatives' capitalist understanding of economics, we are led by this statistic to a very worrying conclusion. If the labor market is, in fact, competitive, And if companies pay higher wages to incentivize...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?